learning about biblical manhood and womanhood on Sunday mornings at Green Acres Baptist Church and the youth program here. And in the Old Testament, Genesis chapters 1 through 3, we learn that God created men and women together in his image. There is an inherent equality there that cannot be denied, man and woman together in the singular image of God. So you need both a man and a woman to be the image of God. And in chapters 2 and 3, we learn that God, in this image of God, image is a picture, right? It is the picture of God within his creation, upon his creation. God does this to his own glory, so that his image is the crown of his creation, the focal point of his creation, which is why humanity has been the dominant species upon the earth for as long as humanity has been here. Okay, so God places his image upon the earth, man and woman together, and we also learn that like man is the picture of God in relationship to his creation. So man is given the responsibility of a Lord, right? Okay, and I use scare quotes there because we are not Lord, we are a picture of the Lord. There's a difference there. Okay, too many people trying to be God, not going to work. All right, too many men trying to be God, and that's not going to work. Right, so God gives man the responsibility to name the creatures, to search out a suitable helper for himself. He can't find a suitable helper, so God creates the woman. And he creates the woman a suitable helper for the man. This doesn't put her in subjugation to the man in any way. Instead, it is a recognition like man needs woman to be the complete image of God. And the woman, in that instance, is created to be a picture of creation, humanity, particularly the people of God, like in relationship to God. And so upon the earth, we have this picture in like the marital relationship, particularly, like we have this picture of God in relationship to his creation. God has created, and God in relationship to humanity, and God has created humanity a suitable helper for himself. Well, to do what? Does God need help doing something? No, God does not need help doing something, but it is suitable for him to create his image within his creation in order to accomplish his own glory. And we see in Genesis chapter 1, like his glory is what he is concerned about in the creation process. Each day he steps back, he observes his own creation, and he says, "It is good. It is good." We also learn that it is not good for man to be without woman in Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 3, humankind rebels against God, fails God, right? Now God's working all this together from the foundation of the world. I get that, but humankind fails God. And God's response is to come in and do what Adam should have done for his wife after his wife took the first bite of the forbidden fruit. He should have redeemed her. He should have saved her, right? But no, he partook in her sin, so he failed. He failed as a man, as a representative of God, as a picture of God in relationship to humanity, right? And so God comes in, he says, "No, Adam, this is how you handle things, right? You redeem her." So God creates clothing for her. He issues a promise. The curse was mainly upon the serpent, and the man and the woman is redeemed in that whole picture, confirming for us the man is a picture of God in relationship to humanity, and the woman is a picture of humanity in relationship to God. Throughout the Old Testament, men and women are treated essentially the same in a vast majority of passages. So the passages where they are treated differently are laws that protect women from being in bad relationships. We saw that. The passages where men and women are treated differently are those descriptive passages where women are described. The primary descriptor for women in the Old Testament is beautiful, right? And the primary descriptor for men in the Old Testament is strong. In fact, men are instructed be strong, be courageous. So we notice a difference between men and women in just physicality, the beauty of a woman versus the strength and the harshness of a man, and those things are defining characteristics in the Old Testament. But beyond that, men and women are essentially treated equally, given equal opportunity when it comes to nearly everything except being a priest and the priesthood, right, who could only be a man. And in fact, not even all men qualified. You had to be a man who was also a Levite, who was also not maimed or lamed or with blemish, right? Because there's a picture there of God's holiness, and the priest was to be like a picture of a mediation between God and man and holiness there. And still, this priest had to go through like a ritualistic cleansing in order to symbolically approach God, approach the altar of God, especially the Holy of Holies. So it's all meant to be a picture. Everything that God does is meant to be a picture there. We get to the New Testament. Paul treats manhood and womanhood the same as the Old Testament does. He treats the law the same way that the law treats itself in Galatians. And today I want to look at Jesus' teaching. Jesus' teaching when it comes to biblical manhood and womanhood. Now, it may surprise you, but Jesus didn't distinguish between the roles or the statuses of men and women nearly ever, as we have recorded, right? But there is one particular passage he does, and that is Matthew chapter 19. Most people will go to this passage to either find the exception clause when it comes to divorce, like except when it comes to marital infidelity, then you can get a divorce, right? And they'll come to look at that and to evaluate what that means, or they'll come here to say, oh, look, Jesus actually did talk about what it means to be married. He defined marriage as between a man and a woman, and it is good to come to this passage for those things. But I just want to look at basic biblical manhood and womanhood as we look at Matthew chapter 19. So when Jesus had finished these words, there are words that come before this, so there's context here, so just remember that. When Jesus had finished these words, he departed from Galilee and came into the region of Judea beyond the Jordan, and large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Some Pharisees came to Jesus, testing him and asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all?" No, they're trying to trap Jesus, right? And they know Genesis chapter 1, God created man and woman, and they become one flesh, right? They know that. They know the law. They know what they are saying from the Old Testament, and we'll look at that a little bit. And so they know what they are doing. They're trying to trap Jesus. They're testing him. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? And Jesus answered, they're referring to Mosaic Law. Jesus answers by going to a text that predates the Mosaic Law. He goes to Genesis chapters 1 and 2. He answered and said, "Have you not read that he who created them in the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." So Jesus' answer to them, of course, a man may not divorce his wife for any reason. God created them. He created them male and female. He created them to become one flesh. They do become one flesh, and what God has joined together, nobody should separate. Morally speaking, divorce is wrong. So Jesus answers the question morally, ethically, rather than according to the law, right? So immediately we see like the law is not a standard for righteousness, which according to the law, Exodus 20:20, the law is not a standard for righteousness. Instead, the law was meant to cause us to develop a fear of God, to test us and develop a fear of God. And it's that fear of God that leads us to become sinless, to reject sin, not the law itself. And so Jesus here takes the same approach to the law that the law does, but then the Pharisees come back and they say, "Why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and send her away?" Now, the passage they are referring to is in Deuteronomy chapter 24. And in Deuteronomy chapter 24, and let me just read this for you, it says, "When a man takes a wife and marries her, If then she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house, and if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. Here, defiled just meaning she had sexual relations with another man, right? For that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance. Like that's Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. Now, when I read that, I don't see any command for anyone to give anyone a certificate of divorce. So the Pharisees here they're twisting the Old Testament text. They're twisting the plain words of the law. And when we read the Bible, the simplest reading of a text is usually the correct reading of the text, right? There is no command there. There is no imperative for anyone to give anyone a certificate of divorce. Instead, it assumes that men are not going to favor their wives and they're going to give their wives certificates of divorce, right? They're not going to love their wives like they should. And so having received a certificate of divorce, if the woman goes and marries another man, that man can never take her back. This is a protection for women that they wouldn't get back into a terrible relationship with an unloving man. Okay, that is not quite what these Pharisees are getting at with their question. They really are trying to trap Jesus, and they're twisting the words of God in order to try to trap Jesus. And so Jesus answers them and says, because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted. He changes the wording there. He says permitted instead of commanded, right? Jesus got it. Jesus read the Old Testament. Jesus reads the Bible. We should just go read the Bible too. And by the way, when I ask our students, like, was there any command in there for anyone to get a divorce? They immediately were able to answer, no, they didn't see a command in there either. And so Jesus actually changes the language. He says, Moses permitted you. He didn't command you. He permitted you to get to divorce your wives. Because of the hardness of your hearts, because you are unloving, because you don't know how to love your wives. But from the beginning, it has not been this way. Jesus says, I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for immorality, they're talking about a wife cheating on a husband, right? Except for immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. He sins. Just like Deuteronomy 24, like he sins. It is an abomination before God. And his disciples, they responded by saying, if a relationship of the man with his wife is like this, it's better not to marry. Like, if we like actually have to love, like selfless love that doesn't hold any wrongs against anyone, like that kind of love, to be patient, to be kind, to not boast, to not be concerned about our own desires, to even if our wives sin against us, right? And we are so offended that it's really difficult for us to let that go, but still to love the wife. Like, if that's what a marriage is, if that's what a relationship is, it's better not to marry. Like, that's difficult. And Jesus' response is a little bit probably different than what we would expect. And Jesus said to them, not all men can accept this statement, but only those to whom it has been given. Like, marriage isn't for everyone. And some people are to remain unmarried, right? For there are eunuchs who are born that way from their mother's womb. There are eunuchs who are made eunuchs by men, and there are also eunuchs who made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. People choose to abstain from sexual behavior. People are made to abstain from sexual behavior, either from birth or by men, right? And Jesus just says, he who is able to accept this, let him accept it. Like, marriage isn't for everyone. And if marriage isn't for us, then we shouldn't pursue it. If it is, then we should, right? God has different plans for different people. when it comes to that. But marriage itself, it's so to be a picture of who God is that divorce is abominable before God. Now, in this text, what we see about biblical manhood in particular, right, because men are obviously in view here. They're in view in Deuteronomy 24. They're in view here in Matthew chapter 19. Like, what it means to be a man biblically is quite literally to present our bodies, our minds, our hearts as living sacrifices. And when we do that in the context of marriage, it is a good thing. Too difficult for some, right? And for those who find it too difficult, like, accept Jesus' teaching here. Don't get married if you're not able to love like this, right? Which is, without the Holy Spirit and without God, that's everyone. Like, we are all selfish, right? And what people call love in our society today is more of an infatuation than actual love. Like, love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast, love is self-sacrificing, and love does not hold any wrongs against anyone. Like, that is love. Okay? But people today get married based on infatuation, not love. Based on their lust, their desires, their preferences, their self-identities, not love. And we should take Jesus' advice here seriously. Like, some people should not get married. And some people should. And it's not that one is better than the other. God just has different plans for different people, right? But to be a man of God is to, particularly in marriage relationship, if marriage is part of God's plan for us, like, our wives never fall into disfavor with us. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter how they sin against us, right? We always find them favorable, because our love for them is not based on our infatuation with them. Our love for them is based on God, who God is, and what Christ has done. Based on being a man of God, the picture of God in relationship to humanity, and based on the knowledge of the fact that women, particularly in marriage relationship in this case, right, are the picture of humanity in relationship to God. They are the ones to be redeemed, lifted up, edified. And so as men, we redeem, we lift up, we edify, we sacrifice ourselves. That is how we are a picture of the gospel and a picture of God. And this is not a job for those who are weak at heart. This is not something that is for pansies, right? Christianity is not for weak people. We are to be meek, we are to be patient, we are to be kind, we are to be gentle. We are not to be weak, right? When it comes to our resolve, particularly in our resolve for loving our wives. And when men find the desire and the passion and the need to be men again, we will see many wrongs in our society corrected. But we start here, like, men, be strong. Men, be courageous. Men, love your wives. Men, do difficult things. Sacrifice yourselves for others. Take your self-identity. Take your self-proclaimed, like, orientation, whether that's sexual or not. Squash it. Be a man of God. Love your wives like Christ loves his church. Do not let your wives fall out of favor with you. Be the living sacrifice God has called you to be. That's the message we find here. And that's what we are to be. And if we remain unmarried, we do so for the kingdom of God. So with that, we can devote more attention to that, and so that we can be living sacrifices in other ways without having the cares that marriage necessarily brings along with it. And God has a place for both types of people. That's the message here.